What we're going to talk about first are kind of some of the events that we have for the rest of the month and what's coming up on the horizon. Then we're going to dive into a bunch of other material today to include a conversation about what's going on in the market. Then we're going to pivot and talk a little bit about our duty to disclose, just because I've been getting a lot of questions recently about that. I want to make sure we have a clear understanding about that. So we'll have a conversation regarding that. We'll also have a conversation regarding procuring cause, which is something that doesn't really get taught at real estate school, but is a big, big deal, especially if you like to get paid. And then we'll talk about maybe some things you can do or add to your conventional financing addendum, as well as your inspection contingency addendum, just to strengthen them a little bit and kind of protect your buyers from some of the situations we're seeing out there. So without further ado, before I dive in, CE reminder, CE reminder, CE reminder. When is our CE due?
June 15th.
Technically June 30th, but I highly recommend you shoot for June 15th, right?
August this year?
Yeah, watch yourself. Do not be spreading that month. We have people say, I heard Todd say August. So make sure that you guys are, especially with some of these days we're having weather rides, you're hunkering down, start making progress on your CE if you haven't knocked it out already. If you have questions like, hey Zach, what do I owe, what modules do I have to do, etc., email or call Katie. She can go to Pulse Portal if you're not familiar with it and look all that information up for you.
We can all do that as well.
You can, and I love to hear you say that, Debbie. I highly encourage you to do that on your own. But if you have questions about it, contact Katie. And one thing to remember is even when you complete a course, it's not automatically going to show up on Pulse Portal immediately. That education provider has a few days before they have to upload it. Most of them are pretty good about doing it quickly, but give yourself some buffer by having it done by the 15th of June so they upload it and have everything where it needs to be by the 30th. Okay, thanks. I had to say that, otherwise Katie would probably kick me in the shin if I forgot to talk about CE. I also want to extend a congratulations to everybody that completed BOLD. It was an awesome round of BOLD. I highly appreciate you being there supporting it. For those of you that weren't there, no big deal. We'll be having more BOLDs in the future, but it was an awesome event. Would you raise your hand if you were there? Awesome. Can I just get some feedback as to what you guys thought about the round that we had here in Rochester?
I thought it was amazing.
Okay.
I thought our coach was absolutely phenomenal. And the smaller group I felt was really, it just felt better. It really did. I thought it was really good.
Yeah. Anybody else? Anybody second that? Anything different? Second it? Yeah, I agree. I've been to quite a few BOLDs, and they've almost always been like 100+ people. It's pretty wild. You kind of get lost in the mixture. You don't really get to know the coach as well one-on-one. But the smaller setting here, first off, being here was more convenient. But having that kind of smaller setting, I thought was really awesome. I got to connect not only with teammates more, but also with the coach. So we'll be looking to do that at least on an annual basis, if not twice a year. So thanks again to everybody, and congratulations for those that graduated. Tomorrow, there's a class on how to get paid fast, dot loop submissions and green sheets from 1 to 2. We also have a happy hour on the 25th. Mel will be in the office this Thursday for agent tech support from 10 to 3. I want to, also an admin note. No worries. The 29th, which is Monday, Memorial Day, our office will be closed. So we'll see, Mark. So just as a heads up, you're more than welcome to come in, work, use the office, etc. But we will not be working from a staff standpoint on Monday. Looking to the future a little bit, a couple of dates and events I want to throw out to you that might be important to put on your calendar. Lance Logan is going to be in the area June 8th in Brooklyn Park from 1 to 3. He's hosting an event that talks about how he grew his business from where it was to an operation that does over 1,000 transactions annually, all kind of based in the Houston area. So I highly recommend that if you can make some time for that, it's just in the afternoon, so you can even work in the morning, drive up, partake. 1 to 3, you could beat traffic on the way back. If the cost is $29, I posted the Eventbrite link in our Facebook group. I'll do it again just as a reminder. And here's what I'll say about Lance in his operation. We have no shortage of agents out there that are crushing it in all kinds of different companies. Everybody will host a seminar, especially if they're going to get some money for it, to tell you some tips and tricks, right? What I'll say about Lance is he is not your typical high-producing agent in operations. The guy has no ego. He's extremely smart. He's not your typical high-I personality that you think is just sales, sales, sales. He's a very kind of smart, quiet, reserved, business-minded guy. So I really, really encourage you to go to that event if you can, because I think you'll have some awesome takeaways from what he's doing in his business and how you can apply it to yours. because he's actually relatively new to the business too. He's probably only been licensed for a handful of years. He's already got an operation that's doing 1,000 units a year, which sounds amazing, but also gives me like a mild heart attack. I don't even know where you would begin. But do that today for me, please. Did you bring me some pizza too, sir?
I didn't.
Well,
I was gonna bring
make
a
up for that
pizza,
after the
but-
meeting. That's okay. Okay, so that's Lance, June 8th, 1 to 3 p.m., Brooklyn Park. June 15th, if you are interested in the career visioning process, the second part of career visioning is coming on June 15th. It's called 30, 60, 90. It's held in Minneapolis. It'll be from 9 to 5. It covers an interview process, kind of the first 100 days training plan you'd have for people that you hire. Just to be clear, 30, 60, 90 is really a course designed to kind of train and bring people and onboard people into your operation if you're looking to hire. So if you're looking to hire, or you think you will be even 6 months to a year from now, it might be a good course for you to attend. Otherwise, you might choose to pass on that one, just as a heads up. Also, I want to give you a heads up on one of my favorite guys coming to the Twin Cities. Anybody know who I might be talking about? Mr. Gene Rivers. Love Gene. He's awesome. July 12th. He's going to be in Bloomington from 9 to 4. The name of the course is Lead Generation Plus. He's by far one of the best instructors in Keller Williams. Highly, highly recommend and encourage you to attend that. It'll be a widely attended event. It's in Bloomington, which is a little bit on the south side of town up there, so it's not too bad. So,
I second that.
date is what?
June 12th. You like
July,
June?
yeah.
I'm sorry, July 12th. Sean, if you show up in June, that's okay. Figure it out. June 8th for Lance, June 15th for 30, 60, 90, and July 12th for Gene Rivers. Again, I'll post that Eventbrite link in our Facebook page. I haven't yet, it's still a little ways out. Our next key meetings are going to be June 6th and June 20th. Again, June 6th and June 20th. And you'll see the calendar come out shortly for next month as well. And then looking way to the future, we kind of have a pretty big deal coming up in a few months. Any guess as to what that is? What? Yeah, say it a little louder.
Mega camp.
You sound pumped, Leanne. Absolutely. We got Mega Camp coming. It's going to be in Austin from 12 to 15 September. The reason I bring it up is, start thinking about it, because it's a little bit more of a logistical challenge to plan for, book airfare, hotel coordination, and tickets and all that.
It's later this year.
Well,
I
it's
know.
traditionally been in
I was gonna say,
September,
yeah.
and last year they did it in August, which
Yeah.
is a terrible idea, because if you've been to Austin, Texas in August, and you're coming from Minnesota, there's nothing right about that. So, but I want you guys to put it on your radars and think about it, because I'd love to see as many people attend as we can, because it's such a phenomenal training event. I went to Mega Camp when I was still at Edina Realty, came back, and not long after became a member of Keller Williams. That's how awesome the experience I had down there was. Yep,
So it's in September this year,
it's
right?
in September, way better than August, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
12 to 15 September in Austin. If you have questions about it, let us know. Okay, any questions about any of that information I just covered, or some of the events on the horizon?
I'd
Yes,
like to just add, sign up early because it sells out.
very good point regarding Mega Camp specifically, right? Also, Sally is hosting a lunch and learn here tomorrow from 12 to 1. I like to emphasize lunch. So just so you know, if you need a free lunch tomorrow, she'll be hosting some good stuff tomorrow, talking about AMIC and some of the great programs they provide that you can utilize with your clients and they can benefit from. So if you would like to attend, feel free to. I'll pass this around. If you have any other questions, contact Sally, our in-house lender. Okay. Whew. We got through our info. Now the fun begins. All right. So what you have in front of you, the front and back sheet, is a market summary. I want to spend some time. We're almost at the halfway point of the year. Believe it or not, 2017 is flying by, and I want to take some time to kind of mastermind or look at what's going on in the market and see what some of our takeaways are and kind of what can shape the conversation we're having with clients. So if you look at the first page, which is primarily graphs that represent what's been going on so far this year, what are some takeaways or what are some things that you notice? Is it funny?
It's not really, but no inventory.
But there's inventory, it's just lower.
Right.
So let's talk about inventory, let's talk about absorption rate. When I look at the absorption rate graph, in a balanced market, what's that? You need to, okay, in a balanced market, What do we like to see our absorption rate here? How many months of inventory do you typically like to see in a balanced market? 4 to 6. Yeah, I would say it's like 3 to 5, about 3 to 5 months. So 4 to 6, 3 to 5, it's right in that range, right? So if we look at that graph, we see November 16 to March of 17, even into April, what have we done? We've dipped below that magical threshold of 3, like we've dipped well below it, meaning our absorption rate is at about a couple months right now, which means we're not a balanced market, which means we know what kind of market we're in. Just for everybody's frame of reference, what type of market are we in right now? Seller's market, because if you list something, it literally flies off the shelf, right? That's why we're seeing that crazy low absorption rate. But here's the takeaway: if you look back just to a year before, it was relatively balanced. But what kind of market were we in even this time last year? It was still a seller's market. We were seeing multiples, just not to the degree that we are today, right? The other thing I think is interesting, if you look at the sold to list ratio, where is it at now compared to where it was just a few months ago?
Just as high as it can get.
It's off the chart almost, right? It's the highest we've seen recently within the last kind of rolling 12 months. So that means if you're listing a great property, it's selling pretty darn close to actual list price, right? And the other thing I want to look at is if you look at numbers of listings since the beginning of the year, number of listings, what has happened? Especially with new listings. It was trending down toward the end of last year, right? Then we see January 17, then February, March, April, it's literally spiked, right? So despite that huge increase in listings, we still have a shortage, and our absorption rate is still below what a balanced market is, right? So let's flip it over to the back page and take a look at some of these numbers. I think they're very, very interesting and they're very telling, because we have an inventory shortage overall, but is that true of all of our price points? No. So that's deserving of a little bit more of a conversation. So absorption rate, I already talked about. Percentage change. The absorption rate is down almost 30% year over year. That's why you guys are feeling that pressure. That's why you're seeing those multiple offers and you're sensing the buyer frustration and the seller elation, right? Let's look at average sale price. This is huge, year over year. Year to date, average sale price is up almost 12%. Is that sustainable? What do we like to see in terms of average appreciation in a healthy market? 3 to 5%. It's the same as the absorption rate, about 3 to 5. Absorption rate 3 to 6 months. 3 to 5%. That's a healthy market. That's a healthy degree of appreciation. If we're appreciating by 12% year over year, that's a drastic increase in home prices almost immediately, right? And that 12% increase is why you're seeing what kind of issues right now with some of your transactions. Appraisal issues, right? Because 12% appreciation freaks appraisers out, right? If they're coming up and they're writing a report and they're showing this property at the same time last year was worth 12% less than it is now, that causes appraisers to have the EBGBs a little bit, because that they know that that's kind of unhealthy, very rapid pace of appreciation. Did this not happen about a decade ago? You guys, how many of you were selling homes prior to the bust? Tell us about the market then. What were you seeing? What was happening prior to 2005?
We're not even on the market, and that's kind of what we're seeing now.
Remind me, it was multiple offer territory, escalation clauses left and right, crazy appreciation. The only difference between then and now has to do with what? There was what?
There was more volume.
Interest rates now.
Right, interest rates is a big one, but so also similarly related to interest rates, what is really tightened, or what is there a lot more scrutiny? Lenders, right? So we have to keep that in mind. Back then we saw a huge increase in appreciation, and it was kind of compounded by some kind of iffy lending practices that were going on. Quite frankly, some of that appreciation was artificial due to the sketchy lending activities that were occurring. The appreciation we're seeing right now, though, is based on the market. And what the market is driving this appreciation. Would you agree? Right. In my opinion, it's not necessarily artificial or inflated. It's a true reflection of what's going on in the market. Yes, sir.
But is it sustainable?
That's a great question, Nick. That's what we're talking about.
How long is it?
How much long do you, and or are we going to kind of continue to see, appraisers kind of curb it a little bit or try to help it not go up as quickly? But what are people doing to circumvent appraisals?
Bring a clause that they'll pay the difference.
They'll pay the difference or bring in cash to transactions, right? So we're still closing these at these higher price points, which is going to continue to drive appreciation. Really, the only person that can probably, the only entity that can probably step in and have an immediate impact on this is who? The government through what? Interest rates, right? Prices are getting up there. Interest rates, so prices aren't necessarily artificially high, but what is artificially low? Our interest rates, right? And the government isn't necessarily changing them right now, even though they're probably due for a change. Why? Say again?
Yeah, they want to fuel the growth.
They want to continue to fuel growth. They want to continue for homes to be affordable for people to buy, right? Because if the interest rate goes up, what does that mean for buyers?
Less buying power.
Less buying power. Affordability goes down a little bit. They can't necessarily purchase the properties, which slows the market down, right?
Which is kind of happening if we have to put the prices away, right?
Yeah, well, that's the market. The market will find a way to correct it as well, you know, on its own before the government tries to kind of get in and modify what the market is doing, right? So average sale price up by almost 12%. Average days, and or I'll take average and median days on market, respectively down about 10% and almost 17%. So they're going on, they're flying off, prices are increasing, basic supply and demand. But let's look at the breakdown in the two charts below as to how it relates to price points. If I'm looking at the price points from about 100,000 to 180,000, and I look all the way to the far right column where it has a percent change, what are all those percentages? What do they all have in common? Sold listings. They're all negative. They're all negative. Your sold listings at the price point from 100,000 to 180,000 are all negative. They're not selling because there's just fewer of them, right? But what is that price point indicative of? Who are buying those homes? First-time home buyers. So if we look at this information, who's feeling the pinch more than anybody? It's your first-time home buyers, right? Because that's the price point that's getting sucked up right away or just is having issues. So conversely, if you go down, if you look at about 180,000 all the way up to 400,000, what do all those numbers have in common? They're positive. Year to date, we're selling way more in the 180,000 up to $400,000 price point, right? And if you look at it, our biggest gain is in which one of those price points? 300 to 400,000, right? That's a huge gain. Well, what type of homes are selling in that price range right now? New construction homes. And who are buying those new construction properties? It's your move-up folks, right? It's the people that are sitting on the homes that the other people are waiting to buy, right? So what we're seeing is, if you look at the numbers, it's telling the story and why we're seeing the leg that we're seeing. Hey, we're seeing a lot of positive numbers. We're trending. We're doing really good in terms of sold listings in this higher price point. And we know that those people have to move out first before we can get the other ones sold. So when we look at this and we see this inventory shortage and we panic a little bit, I think that as it continues to play out, we'll kind of see ourselves catch up with the market a little bit as those move-up buyers eventually are able to make that move into their newer properties. They'll offload and sell the properties that our first-time home buyers are waiting to get into, right? Or at least it won't be as fiercely competitive because there'll be more of them on the market.
Look at the 400 to 499.
Yeah.
And 500.
That's
crazy.
That's green on mine because that's well, no, the 500 plus is the largest percentage increase. Fewer units, obviously, much fewer units, but a 62% increase
So
year
if
over
you
year.
have a 475, just price it at 500.
Well, it's because of the new construction, I imagine.
Right, we already talked about that. I'm just teasing, Jeff. But I think because here's the deal, we're having a lot of people out there ask us what's going on in the market, what's driving these numbers, why is it such a seller's market, what's happening with inventory. And I think the story is, and we talked about this before, well, in the United States of America, we stopped building homes for a decade. We just recently started building again. We're building them like, you know, we're on speed right now. They're flying up left and right. And we're doing that because we need to clear all these people out of the homes that they're currently in, get them into their next property so we can free up that inventory and get it sold to all of our first-time home buyers that need properties, right? Because in addition to all this, if you're stuck renting right now, Are you paying modest rental rates?
No.
No, even more compounded in Rochester, right? The rental market's insane. So when we're out there having conversations with people, buying is obviously way more advantageous if we're looking at, cost to buy versus cost to rent. Oh, by the way, the appreciation over time is going to be better. It's just that everybody's fighting for such a limited pool of inventory right now, which is leading to the drastically sharp increase in our appreciation in home values. But I think as we continue, the way we solve this problem is new homes. The more new homes we can build, the more we'll add to the inventory, which will help kind of balance the market again. But if you look at the totals overall, sold listings year to date, look at that. We're only down what?
4%.
We're only down 4.5%. And if you look at the totals, in 2016, it was 1,471. In 2017, it's 1,407. So let's just write, it's basically 70 units. Now, if I had asked you about how many units do you think we're short by this year versus last year, would you have guessed more or less than 70? You probably would have guessed more. You probably would have guessed a lot more, right? We're coming out of the first quarter, we're hitting our stride, we're coming into the spring, summer market, so we're gonna see more going on in the market, but I think we're gonna continue to probably make some progress and get more in line with what we saw last year in terms of sales. Because, if we look at April, the percentage change in the month, we were down 22%, but overall year to date, we're only down about 4.5%. So April was a tough month when it came to listings sold compared to the previous year. But we're ready to head into what are traditionally very strong months, right? May is going to be huge. June, July, August, into September, those are all going to be pretty good months. So you got that to look forward to. Pending listings, overall, the total, we're down about 8%. But again, if you look at those price brackets, you'll notice again which ones are trending negative and which ones are trending positive. Active listings. Now, this to me is interesting. In terms of active listings, we're down 13.2%. I think that's what we're feeling more than anything. It's the active listing inventory for our buyers that's hurting us. And look at the negative numbers from the $100,000 to the $180,000 price point in terms of active listings, percent change year over year. They're all double-digit negative numbers. It's crazy, right? And then if you look into 180 to 200,000, even that one's a significantly high double-digit number. And I think it's, even when we look at active listings, when those new construction properties sell, do all of them hit MLS?
No.
No, a lot of that's selling off MLS, which is why you see negative numbers in terms of active listings in those price brackets, but positive numbers in what's actually sold and closed, right? Those are all selling outside of the MLS, so we have to keep that in mind, or a good majority of them are anyway.
What's the sad thing is I don't think you can buy a new construction under 200 right now. No way.
And why aren't builders building those?
Because they can sell the higher ones.
Yeah, there's not as much margin, right? If I'm a builder, I'm gonna go to 350 plus all day long. I'm gonna make way more money, right? But the sad thing is, what we need more than anything are the first-time homebuyer properties. So, but what we need to do is have those people in the first-time homebuyer properties build those new construction homes, move there, and then sell the other one to the people that really need that property. Okay, so actives down 13%, and then new listings year over year only down about 7%. So here's my question to you. If it's a seller's market, then why in the world aren't some people selling? Why do we see those negative numbers? Debbie, you hit it, the mark, right on the head. The struggle for our sellers is we can tell them until we're blue in the face that it's such a good time to sell right now. You're going to get top dollar to sell quickly. You'll be able to negotiate the heck out of it. But a lot of people didn't realize they're going to become a what? As soon as I sell, yeah. Or maybe if you take it to the extreme, maybe homeless. Right? Well, if I sell my property, that's great. I might get top dollar, but then that means I'm going to be thrown right out into the mix of every other buyer that's fighting tooth and nail for properties and paying a premium, unless I decide to build. Right? Well, you'll still or rent.
For a while until you wait it out and find out what.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's not even that true either.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Throwing money away.
I know where you're
Rental
at.
prices.
Yeah. Yes, and I think too. What we need to do is really realize the kind of advantage our sellers have right now in this market. Because when we're entertaining offers, what can sellers do?
We can establish a closing
Yeah.
date.
We can leave the closing date kind of fluid or contingent upon them finding their next property, right? And with the kind of fiercely competitive market we're in, how many of your buyers would probably be open to something like that?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So if you've got sellers that are fearful about making that move or putting their home on the market because they're going to turn into a buyer that they feel might be, put in a hard spot, so here's the deal. We can solve that right now, and this is the kind of market to do that in. We could put your home on the market, get you top dollar, and simply make it contingent upon you finding your next property. There's a good chunk of buyers out there that would go for that right now, if that means that's what it's going to take for them to get the property. So kind of help educate them that you've got that option available if you're looking to sell. It doesn't mean you have to close when the buyers want you to. You go back to the buyers and say, thanks, but no thanks. You're going to close on our terms because we're driving the market right now. Any questions, thoughts, takeaways on the market info? Is that kind of useful or is it too detailed? We can do that on a more regular basis if you
Do you
guys.
feel that we'll start seeing that shift? Or do you think we're in it already,
So what shift?
where it shifts back to the buyer?
I think two things are going to happen. I think we're going to get enough people that have moved up that we're going to see an increase in inventory. And at some point, the government's finally going to increase interest rates, which will slow down some of the buying madness that we're seeing right now. We're still going to have a very, very healthy set of buyers, pool of buyers. But what are aside from great interest rates right now, which are unbelievable, what are like two other things that are really fueling buyer demand?
Rates, just more rates.
Yep, and if we remove those from the equation, what else?
Cost of economic growth.
Okay, that's big what I'm looking for. People are making money again. They have jobs again, right? Our economy is growing. It's pretty strong right now. So people are, hey, I'm making money. I feel secure. Let's go ahead and purchase a property. That's a big one. And what's the other biggest factor that's contributing to the buyer desire right now? Interest rates are great. We're making money again. We're back to work. And where are home prices? Yeah, they're up. They're going up. But if you look at them, they're actually pretty darn good, all things considered. And if I'm a buyer right now, I know they're only going to continue to go where? Yeah, they're going to continue going up. So I better buy now because we have to educate our buyers. Do what's best for you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. If that means you wait a year, that's fine. But I, as a real estate professional, need to do my due diligence and explain to you you're likely going to be paying X amount of more. Talk to my lender, Sally, who will help you do some projections as to what your monthly payment will likely be next year versus this year. And then based upon that information, make an educated decision as to whether or not you think it makes more sense to buy now or a year from now, which might mean a couple $100 more in a monthly payment, which might mean instead of a $275,000 property, you're looking at a $250,000. And oh, by the way, at $250,000 next year is not going to get you a $250,000 this year, get you, right? And I tell them that's not me being salesy at all. That's me just educating you about the market so you can make an informed decision. Because I don't want you to come back to me a year from now and say, Zach, why did you tell me all that stuff? Because now I'm paying more money for, less home. Other thoughts? But I think the new construction inventory is what's going to help us more than anything. And then if the interest rates finally get tweaked. And at some point, the prices will get so high that will shut down buyer demand a little bit too, right? And some of our sellers are going to say, oh man, I really should have hopped on the opportunity back then. Okay, so I'd like to change gears a little bit. You have a sheet in front of you that covers some topics I want to have a conversation about and just touch on based on a lot of phone calls and emails I've been getting from some of our agents. Just have some questions about things that are going on. Okay, so first off, in our code of ethics, information concerning latent material defects is not considered confidential information under the code of ethics, okay? Because we all know that when we're representing somebody with full agency, we owe them a few things. There's an acronym, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, all that fun stuff, right? One of them is confidentiality, okay? But if I owe Debbie, my seller, confidentiality, does that mean that I cannot disclose anything to the other parties?
If you know something about the house, you have to disclose it, and if the seller gives you permission to disclose, you can.
Right, so let's have a conversation more about that, Debbie. If the seller gives me permission to disclose something, let's say they don't give me permission to disclose something.
In regards to what though?
That's a question I'm looking for. There are certain things that we have to disclose regardless of whether or not our seller wants us to, right?
Yep.
If your seller comes up to you, Sean, and they say, Sean, here's the deal, we get water in our basement from time to time, but I don't want you to tell anybody that. What do you have to do then?
Tell them.
Tell who?
You have to tell
the
your seller that it has to be disclosed. It's on the disclosure that
Yeah.
you don't want them to lie about it or you'll end up in court.
Absolutely. So I'll give you an example of a phone call I got recently. It said, here's the deal, Zach, we've got this property. I'm the listing agent, it's on the market, we've accepted an offer. And the sellers just informed me that the people that put in their windows, well, they've had some issues with their windows and they've communicated with the company, and the company is going to come out and replace the windows, hopefully before closing, but it might be after closing. The inspection is set for tomorrow, and the sellers don't want me to tell the buyers. Well, what should that agent do in that situation?
Tell them.
Right, because if we read a little further, what we have to disclose are what are material facts, right? So to circle back to Debbie's comment, we don't have to disclose everything, right? It's just material facts. And Minnesota state law defines a material fact as the licensee shall disclose to a prospective purchaser all material facts of which the licensee is aware, which could adversely and significantly affect an ordinary purchaser's use or enjoyment of the property or any intended use of the property of which the licensee is aware. And we've kind of got a rule when it comes to disclosure, which is when in doubt, disclose, right? So if you've got a seller saying, hey, our windows are going to be replaced, I don't want you to tell the buyers or the buyer's agent about that, would you agree that windows being replaced is probably a material fact? Right? For anything to do with windows, it's kind of probably a little bit important, right? And so the agent, but here's the deal, because it's always much easier to make the decision in the trading room when you're talking about it in theory than when you're dealing with an actual client and they're saying, Leanne, don't you dare call and tell them. If you do this, we're going to be furious and we're going to fire you. You have a code of ethics to us too. You owe us confidentiality, right? So the piece of advice I'd give you is you need to have an expectation dialogue up front at the time of taking the listing. Build it somewhere into your consultation. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, just so you know, when it comes to disclosing these facts, for example, this disclosure we're about to go over, there are certain items that if I'm made aware of, that you know, we have to, according to state law, disclose to the other interested parties. It's a requirement, right? And so she said, well, what should I do? I said, well, you need to have a disclosures conversation with your seller and say exactly that. Hey, I understand that you're requesting that I not share this information. You know, I'm working for you, I'm working on your behalf, but you have to understand that the state law requires I pass that information on. As a matter of fact, by me passing on that information, it actually protects you because it's disclosing something that you should disclose versus concealing it, which can come back to bite you, right? So I'm not sure how that conversation occurred. I think maybe the buyer's agent was informed before that conversation took place with the sellers, which would not be a recommendation I would make. It would be talking to the sellers, explaining them why you need to make that disclosure, then disclosing it. But the good news is, all in all, things are good. They had the conversation, and we're moving down the right path on that transaction. But any other questions, comments, concerns regarding disclosure and understanding that the same goes on the buy side. If your buyer's financing is falling apart, what do you have to do?
Yes.
If you're the agent, the buyer's agent, and you know, if you just had a conversation with the lender and the lender said, hey, they just took out a car loan, we've got a huge hiccup in their financing, I'm putting it through underwriting right now, there's a chance we might not close on time. What does our code of ethics say you have to do? You're supposed to inform the other agent, right? Does that always happen? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Are you sometimes tempted to say, well, let's wait till tomorrow and see if we...
Or you can call a car salesman and tell them to take that car.
Absolutely. You take that back immediately.
I've done that.
You told him to take it back?
Well, no, I had a situation where they told he was purchasing a home and he co-signed for his cousin on a car, and the finance person at the car dealership said this won't affect you.
Oh. Because they wanted to say it.
Yeah. Well, I took that sale back with the cousin and my buyer, and I said, this does affect him, and you know him. You know that, and you lied to him. Now fix this and get him off of it. So he did.
There you go.
And
The takeaway from that
Wait, what's the
conversation
car?
is, the takeaway from the conversation is, Don't mess with Debbie, right? And number two, as a licensee, we've got a much higher threshold we have to abide by. So as soon as we're informed, we can't just pretend that we didn't hear it. As soon as we're informed, we have to ask ourselves, does it come in fact, do we need to disclose? And err on the side of disclosure. Good time to sneak out. We're transitioning topics, so thank you both for coming. Appreciate it. So now let's talk about another topic that I think still confuses quite a few people still in the industry because it's such a gray area, and that's procuring costs. How many of you went over procuring costs in real estate school when you got licensed? Okay, how many of you actually had it on the state or federal exam? Yeah, it's not on there, but it's a big deal. What is procuring costs?
Who has right to a commission on sale, basically.
Absolutely. Because let me ask you this, if I've got somebody under a buyer rep contract, I show them properties and they buy a home, am I obligated to get paid?
Depends on which home they buy.
The answer is not necessarily, right? A lot of times in our industry, in our profession, people equate a buyer rep contract to, I am gonna get paid, I'm entitled to a commission, right? When in reality, what governs who's entitled to that compensation is the notion of procuring costs, right? So what I have on here on the sheet is the definition, and let's read it and then talk through it. So according to NAR, procuring costs may be defined as a series of events unbroken in their continuity that results in the desired objective. For example, the cause originating a series of events which, without a break in their continuity, resulted in the accomplishment of a private object. The inducing cause or direct proximate cause of something. So it's often referred to as a series of uninterrupted events, is what we're talking about. So what does that actually mean when it comes to, let's say you're a buyer's agent? What does procuring cause actually mean? How does that apply to your business? And it's okay if you don't know the answer.
But it has to start somewhere, you know.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's when you're showing them the house. It could happen the day after.
Mhm.
After you like the buyer goes to an open house.
So let me stop you there and let's work an example, Jim. So let's say that Hannah is your client, you're her buyer's agent, you've had a consultation, you signed a buyer rep agreement. Let's say that I'm a listing agent. I've got Trudy's property listed, phenomenal home. I'm the listing agent, I'm holding an open house. You and I, Jim, we don't have any communication, but Hannah shows up at my open house. She's walking through. She's asking questions about the property. I'm like, oh, it's a phenomenal home. It's in a great area. You're going to love Rochester. You're going to love going to school here. This place is awesome. Schools are great. You'll love this property. She's asking me all kinds of questions. What's the square footage? How much? How do I get pre-approved? I'm answering all these questions for her, and then she leaves. And then later that night or the next day, I see a purchase agreement come in, and it has you listed as a buyer's agent. Number one, how do you think I'm going to feel?
Good, because
Good
it's
job,
the
Nick.
seller's house.
Yeah,
Right. It depends. You have some agents that are like, hey, that's cool, no problem. You got other agents which are like, are you kidding me? I just sold that. That agent can make an argument that by answering all of her questions and showing her the property, I generated her interest in the home and procured that offer.
I just had it
I see
happen.
some hands going up, what you like. Are they stories or are they questions?
No, it's a story that just happened to me.
So I'm gonna push pause on the story for now, and if you have a question, go there.
Well, isn't it up to the buyer to choose?
Absolutely not. Great question.
But isn't it up to the buyer to choose representation? Because what if the buyer doesn't want to choose representation by the listing agent?
So let me give you an answer to that question you're not gonna like. The buyer can choose whoever they want to represent them. Doesn't mean that person is gonna get compensated. It has everything to do with who procured the buyer for that property. This is why it's tricky, I'm telling you. I learned this a few years ago, and it was with another agent, not me, thankfully, but I was fired up. I was calling people, I'm like, I can't, no, I'm just kidding. But, you know, I was like.
Well, which were you, the buyer's agent or the listing?
I was
agent?
helping a new agent who was the buyer's agent. And I'll give you that story and that example because I think, because it gets even worse, like it really gets into the weeds. So let's keep talking about it.
Okay.
So I was a listing agent. She came through the open, answered all of her questions. And matter of fact, Hannah even said to me before she left, you know what? I just came to this thinking that would be cool to check out properties, you know, but now that I've seen this one, you've answered my questions, I'm pretty sure this is the one for me. I just need to think about it some more. And then I see the offer come in, right? Well, now let's look at it from Jim's perspective. What is Jim thinking?
just sold the house without.
Oh, right, now Jim's like, sweet, I gotta go golfing. Yeah.
Usually you wanna train your buyers that,
Yeah.
go to an open house.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, I'm gonna make you look good, don't worry. So Jim had a consultation with Hannah, explained to her the buyer process, explained to her how representation works. They signed a representation contract. Jim actually is the one that received an email e-alert from Flex about the property, called Hannah, told her about it. As a matter of fact, it gets even better. You emailed her about it, so we've got written record and said, Hannah, here's a property, meets everything you're looking for. You should really go take a peek at it during the open house that Zach's hosting today. And if you want to make an offer, if you have questions, just come back, let me know, we can make it happen. She comes through the open, sees it, likes it, comes back, talks with Jim and says, I really, really liked it. I just don't know what to do next. And I have some more questions. Jim answers those questions. They put together an offer and they throw it my way. Who's entitled to the commission? Well, come on now. You guys, people were voting for me earlier.
Yeah, not according to what you just said before.
There's continuity.
There's no.
We're
Did
sure.
you ask her?
So would it
But
be
he
different?
originated it, so I think.
Did you ask her if she was working with a realtor?
So would it have been different? Because I think what you're going to say is that because Hannah came to you and you answered her questions, that you are entitled to being paid.
That's gonna be my argument all day long.
Yeah,
Okay.
but he already initiated it with his client and said, go through this open house.
So I'll
right?
come back to you in 1 minute. But Leanne, that's great that she came, that he told her to go to the open, but it wasn't until I answered all of her questions and took her on the home that she actually became interested in writing it off.
That's one of the.
So let's push pause, let's push pause. Go
But
ahead.
would it change the situation if Jim then had taken her back to the property?
Big difference. In my humble opinion, I still think there's an argument there, but that certainly helps, and that's what I do in my personal real estate practice, right? But so here, there's not gonna be a textbook answer that satisfies you in that example. It's gonna come down to who can make the best argument if it goes to arbitration or if it goes to a panel, right? That's why I said that he had stuff in writing, right? So that's why it's so important to document that stuff and have a written record. So I've been in Jim's situation before. The only thing I do different that I didn't describe in this scenario is I call and email the listing agent saying, hey, my client's gonna stop through your open house, just so you know, right? Because then there's no question, right? No question.
I
But here's
just
the
closed
deal.
on a house that certain thing just happened to me. And my client, we signed the contract on Thursday night, over the weekend, her folks were in town. They didn't tell me they were gonna go out and look at open houses,
Right.
but I said, go ahead, check them out, and tell them that you're working with me,
Mhm.
and we'll get back in touch, and so I didn't know that they were gonna go to the open house. They loved it.
Right.
Called me Sunday and said, this is the one. I'm like, okay, well, and so then I quick made an appointment to go through the house on Monday with him, and but in the meantime, I sent the offer and I told the agent, I'm sending you this offer, but we're going through again. Oh, you haven't seen the house, have you?
Yeah, of
No.
course they're gonna
By the
work
way. Yeah.
Wait, so here's the deal, because it gets more complicated, because here's what I could have done as the agent. Here's what I've seen happen in real life. So I'm the listing agent, I'm PO'd, I think I'm due that commission. So here's what I do. I say, Jim, thanks for the offer, let's make it happen. We work through inspection, we get through appraisal, we're at closing, and I keep all the commission because I'm the listing brokerage and I control the commission. And I say, Jim, we're not gonna pay you a buy-side commission on this one because I have procuring costs. Can that, yeah, so let me pause, because that's the initial reaction that I had. And you could not tell me otherwise until I dove into what it means to be the listing agent in this situation. Because the listing agent has a fiduciary duty to who? The seller. So the listing agent cannot and should not do anything that would jeopardize a good offer on that property, right? So what I could do, what we think is the right thing to do would probably be to tell Jim early on, hey Jim, I got an issue with this. I'm not gonna pay you a commission because I have procuring costs. But if I tell Jim that, what do you think he's gonna suggest to Hannah?
Let's buy a different house.
Let's go find a different property that I know I'm gonna get paid on, right? So what did I just do to my seller as a listing agent?
Just jeopardize their sale.
We'll get to you, Sean. I just kicked that deal to the curb because I had my selfish interest about gaining that additional commission in mind versus them selling the property. So you could make the argument that the best, most right thing to do for the listing agent is to keep their mouth shut, let it close to benefit their client, and then say, I'm not gonna pay you that commission.
Well, then you have to go back to the MLS guidelines. What is the MLS saying that the buyer's agent is going to receive, right?
Buyer's compensation is based on procuring costs, not who has the buyer record. Because can you get the compensation on the buy side deal without having a buyer representation agreement signed? Absolutely. So it's not tied to that agreement. That's what's confusing. Sean, did you have something that I
Yeah,
want you?
back up to the example you just made, how now if Jim did go to his client and say, let's find a different house, because this other agent told him not to pay for it.
Right.
That would be taking his selfish interest in the way
Absolutely.
of his client's interest.
Yes.
He wants that house.
Yes, and Sean, yes, and how is that buyer rep agreement sometimes structured? What is it sometimes? It says, any funds I receive from the seller shall reduce
Reduce
the
compensation.
So if we close and I don't receive any funds from the seller, where can I technically go back and get them from?
A buyer.
From her. So Jim can say to her, Hannah, here's the deal. Yeah, I'd love to help you buy that property. If you decide to, that's great. But the way our contract is written, if the sellers don't pay me, then I'm gonna expect that the commission come from you. Now, Jim doesn't have to do that, but he certainly could. And he could explain that to her, and then Hannah could, of her own, decision-making, decide, okay, I definitely don't want that situation because the sellers are being shysty. If Jim's good, that's how he's gonna sell it to her, right? But if the sellers are gonna be that way, and it's gonna cost me thousands of dollars, I'm just gonna find a new property. What's going on back there?
So can I tell you my little,
Yes.
I had an incident. I
the meeting?
had the seller.
Mhm.
The buyers called me off my sign. Are you working with a realtor? No, we're not. Are you under contract with a realtor? No, we're not.
So I'm gonna pause there. So if we're talking procuring costs right now, Debbie can make the argument, my sign, my advertising procured that buyer.
So they came through the house. I get an offer that evening.
From Jim.
Their realtor.
Okay.
In the meantime, before I get that offer, they came to it the next week after, no, this was the next week, I had another open house, they came to that open house. The same couple after they've already written an offer on one of my other listings. And I just looked at them, I said, are you looking at a different house? Yeah, we might be. Hello, I'm the one that you're under contract with the other agent, So I called their agent and I said, they're still out looking at houses. I said, do you really understand what's happening here? Because I said, number one, I really think that I could get paid on that one. If they keep coming to my open houses, I'm going to get paid with them.
Right.
And he said, they just don't understand. I said, well, it's your job to make them understand.
That's why the consultation is important. And what I will say too is, I'm just gonna throw out a hypothetical. If they were still within a contingency on that offer, they can still get any other house they want.
Well,
because
I
they
didn't
can-
go after the procuring cost simply because I wanted my salary made sold.
And I think that's what you will find most agents do, right? But I'm
However,
telling
I have
you, but there are other agents
yeah.
out there so, Jim was doing the right thing. There are other agents out there. Let's say that I've got a relative who's an agent in Duluth. They know I'm looking to buy a house in the cities. What sometimes happens?
They're gonna write the offer in the loop.
Go look at as many homes as you can with whatever agent will show you properties, and when you find the one you want to write an offer on, let me know, and I'll submit it for you. Raise your hand if you've seen or heard of agents doing that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what procuring cause exists to protect against, right? Situations like that. Was there other questions? So the situation I'll give you is, was an agent in the office, and she had a great friend who wanted to buy a property in Northfield. And she was brand new, so I was kind of helping her with the contracts and stuff. Like, I didn't know all the backstory. I just knew you have a buyer that wants to make an offer. I'll help you do that. That's easy enough to do, right? I'll be there, right? So we put it together to submit the offer. It went to another agent, very, very experienced agent, does a lot of business, knows what he's doing, right? Make the offer, negotiate it, goes through inspection, all that jazz, close, and he says, I'm not going to pay you procuring costs. Well, come to find out, her friend had actually viewed the property prior to going back out there with her, but like a month ago, with not that agent, but an unlicensed person on his team. First off, can you show a property if you're unlicensed?
I don't know. Yes, you can.
Yes, you can, if you have permission of who?
Oh,
The seller.
Yeah.
If the seller gives you permission to show their home, you certainly can. But if you're unlicensed, you can't just go showing and show properties, right? But if you have permission, you certainly can, right? So unlicensed person show the property, a month later, he's in contact with his friend, they go back out and visit the property. This time they bring his dad along, who was the one actually purchasing. Buy the property, put a deal together, they close, right? So you got the listing agent saying, no, we've got procuring cause. We received the phone call initially, showed it to him. Somebody from my team showed it to him a month prior to you guys seeing it again. Well, what's a very key part of the definition of procuring cause? A series of
Events.
a series of uninterrupted events. So my argument was, hey, you showed it to him a month ago. Obviously, you didn't get the job done.
You didn't follow up.
They didn't make an offer. It wasn't until a month later, which I would say, probably throws the series of uninterrupted events out the window. A month later, after viewing it with another agent, did they become interested? It wasn't until then that they become interested in the property and made an offer.
Probably because they got their education in between on what they could afford, what they liked.
Right. Well,
There
who
were a lot
knows?
of
Yeah.
events that could
Absolutely.
have happened in between.
Sure, certainly. And had the listing agent been able to show that they were constantly communicating with them in that period of time, would have made a stronger case for them, right? But either way, they kind of have procuring costs from, hey, we showed it to him first, right? But then the other complication was, well, great, you showed it to the son, but
Not
he's
to the
not the
buyer.
one buying. It's going to be the dad that's going to be buying the property. So, that's why procuring costs can become such a gray
So who
area.
got paid?
So listing agent kept it.
Oh, really?
Kept it at the time of closing, and had it been my deal, I would have pushed tooth and nail to get the whole thing, right? But it's a new agent, and the brokers involved agreed, let's split the commission. That's what they did. And I think oftentimes, in procuring cost cases, you kind of see a splitting of the commission occur, just because there's so many ways to view it as to who's right and who's wrong, unless there's a clear cut. No, I don't think so. Oftentimes, I think you see it split. But you have to understand, I'll get to Sean in just a minute, that buyer rep agreement does not necessarily mean you're gonna get compensated. Do the due diligence to get out there. If they go through an open house, go see it again with them. Go take it to the property. If they're gonna go to open houses, let the agent know. Educate your buyers. Hey, when you go to an open house, I want you to flash my business card like it's an FBI badge. Tell them you've got an agent, and the benefit to that is, oh, guess what? Now they're gonna leave you alone, right? To take all those steps to protect yourself from that.
So I guess, answer part of it, I guess, what are other ways that we can prevent us, from happening to us when we're representing our buyers?
Document everything you do. You can keep as many records, emails.
Email.
And I've had several hearings for preparing class in the past, I said it go both ways. And it seems like the person that has the most documentation wins. They can prove their side and the chain of events that they did to make the sale.
Best documentation and timeline, absolutely. And it certainly helps if, if the buyer's willing to be there and say, no, it's because of this person that I had interest in the property, right? We had that going for us too. So I'm kind of like, come on, guys, like, there's no way we can't win this one. But, the naive guy who 3 years ago didn't really know a lot about procuring costs, got a massive education in it. It's very, very helpful. And thankfully, I got to learn at somebody else's expense, which is why we have team meetings, right? So that when Sean blows up a deal, we all learn from him. No, I'm just kidding. Make t-shirts. Okay, so thank you for the discussion on that. We've got about 5 minutes left. I want to cover two other things that'll be helpful for you that have kind of stemmed from some conversations with agents and just what's going on in the market. The first one, so we're on the back side of that page now. The first one is some language to consider adding to the conventional financing addendum, okay? Because if we're working with an FHA buyer or we're working with a VA buyer and we look at their financing addendum, what is built into those addendums regarding the appraisal?
Escape clause?
An escape clause is built right into those suckers. What does the escape clause essentially say?
If the appraisal doesn't come on to the sale price, they don't have to purchase the property.
Absolutely, they get to immediately cancel, and what do they get back as a result? They get their earnest money back. Is that same verbiage, is that same clause in the conventional financing addendum? No, it's not there, right? But you think to yourself, okay, big deal, but if we get a bum appraisal, well, it just kills the deal. Not necessarily. What could happen? Not even necessarily renegotiating. Most conventional buyers are what?
They're putting money down.
They're strong buyers.
They're
A lot of them have a lot of cash on hand, right? If I'm a conventional buyer and I fill out the purchase agreement saying, hey, I'm putting 50% down on this property, the appraisal comes back 10 grand less. Well, what do the sellers pretty much know about me as a buyer?
They can buy it.
I know you can close that gap. It might mean instead of putting 50% down, you put 40% down, but I know you can close that gap. And the way that our contract is written is that you've agreed to purchase my property at this price so long as you can obtain conventional financing. So guess what? You have to close the gap. I could force your hand to still close on this property and close the gap. Right? Now, if you're working with a great lender, the lender might be able to do something to say they're no longer qualified, this, that, or the other, because it is still contingent upon obtaining financing, right? But if you get the lender on the horn, or you somehow get in writing from them that, hey, they can still close, they're just going to have to bring more cash. Well, they're locked in to purchase because they don't have the escape clause. So the verbiage on this form is what you can add to that addendum to give yourself an escape clause. Buyer reserves the right to cancel and have earnest money refunded in full or renegotiate if the home does not appraise at or above the contract sale price. You're basically taking the conventional financing addendum and you're adding your own escape clause in there to protect your client. It's a huge deal. They don't even know you're doing it for them, but it's a big deal. And I've never had anybody push back on this. I've never had a listing agent push back and say, no, we're not going to do that. Now, in the world of multiple offers, you might approach appraisals a little bit differently right now. But I highly recommend you consider adding that clause to those financing addendums on the conventional side. The same goes for the next one. So some language to consider adding to the home inspection contingency addendum because that form is way different than it was just a year ago, right? What's the big change? It's a huge change, and it's a terrible change in my humble opinion.
Calendar days, if they run out, you find the place anyway.
Right, calendar days I don't have a problem with, but what's the second part of that?
If those calendar days run out and you haven't agreed, we're back to the original agreement. There's no negotiating after that.
Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if the timeline expires and we have not reached an agreement or we have not canceled, you are buying this property.
And
You're done. You're locked in. Your home inspection contingency is gone.
But there are some agents who don't realize how impacted this is.
There are a ton of agents out there. I'm sharing this
And
with
so
you.
we just have to pretend that, hopefully just do it.
Yes,
I mean, really, that's what
yes
it
and
comes down
no,
to.
yes and no, because here's what's gonna happen. So I know this is not in our market center, it's in a different market center. Listing agent, had the property listed, buyer's agent didn't pay attention to the timeline, it expired, they're locked in. So the listing agent communicated to them, hey, that's cool that you have inspection requests, but no, you're locked in, you have to buy. Well, how do you think the buyers felt about that? Right, can they drag their feet and try to do this, that, and the other, and just make the deal unnecessarily complicated and try to cancel? Absolutely. They finally agreed, both parties agreed to cancel, but the sellers got their earnest money plus an additional $2,000.
Well, let's make sure
Wait.
that all of the Keller Williams agents know about this.
Right,
And
that's-
we don't have,
Thank you, Leanne, you're reading my mind. Nick, I'll tell you why, because I said, here's the deal, in order to cancel this contract, we're gonna keep your earnest money and you're gonna pay us an additional $2,000 because in the meantime, we've lost out on market time, we've lost out on prospective buyers. Quite frankly, we could sue you for a lot more than just the earnest money and $2 extra grand, right? If you wanna be a hard enough about it, right? So my recommendation, yeah.
Is that a buyer?
Negotiable. I'll tell you, at first, the buyers are only willing to give up $500 of their earnest money. The agent wrote back and copied the broker of the other company on the email and said, here's the deal. My seller is previously a licensed real estate agent. They know exactly who they can come after for those damages, to include not just the buyer, but also the buyer's agent and the buyer's brokerage. The next response was, here's your money, right? Because they know exactly what happened. So consider adding this language. If the buyer and seller fail to reach an agreement by the timeline specified in line 18, this contract is canceled. Buyer and seller shall immediately sign a cancellation of purchase agreement directing all earnest money refunded to the buyer. So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, instead of buyers automatically being locked in, if this home inspection contingency timeline expires, we're going to revert to what used to happen, which means, hey, if we fail to reach an agreement, it's just canceled, right? And they get their earnest money back. If you add that into your buy-side home inspection contingency addendums, and for some reason there's a discrepancy or you miss or somehow that timeline expires or you miss it, well, you put in a fail-safe to protect you and to protect your buyer. right? Because what else could happen? I could submit my inspection requests to Carrie at noon on the last day, and she could wait all the way till like 11:55 that night to tell me we disagree. We're not gonna cover it. Well, what do we do now? Are we just locked in because they're refusing to make, do I have to try to set a cancellation now in the next 5 minutes to
Well,
protect my
that's what you
people?
would do. I mean, that's what you would do, is immediately submit a cancellation.
If you're still awake and if you can do that in 5 minutes,
But that's what I'm saying, you have to be prepared though to be able to do that.
But this allows
Right.
you not to have to.
which I think,
Right.
which I think it is unreasonable and quite frankly, an impossible threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
So if-
rotten, dirty
You are,
scoundrel. So why
but if you
couldn't
add
we-
that verbiage, you're covering yourself and you're covering your life.
Could we not just write an amendment quickly extending that time?
Absolutely, but it has to get signed off on.
Right,
Has
And if they
to.
don't sign
but
up.
that sometimes is the easier route, let's just extend this quick, because that gets really emotional.
Carrie,
So
here's the
let's-
deal. If it's you and me, we're reasonable agents, we know what we're doing, usually that's what happens. We say, hey, here's the deal, we don't have everything we need, let's sign an amendment to extend that additional 3 or 4 or 5 days.
Okay, but if you're also the agent, I know the date, you know the date. Couple days before, if this thing isn't I'm calling you saying.
Yes
do
and
you-
no.
Do you
But if you don't
anticipate?
pick up,
Yes,
do you
and no.
anticipate that
Not
we're
only that,
going
but
to
Carrie,
extend
let
this?
me ask you this, if I'm the seller's agent, and you guys have just submitted to me some requests that are gonna cost my people $5,000, and we push back, and we say, we'll do this, this, and this, but not all this, and I have not yet heard from you, do you think I'm gonna give you a nice reminder to meet your deadline? Or might I choose to let it expire and save my clients a bunch of money because you guys missed your deadline? Yeah. That's restricted, here's the deal. When you're negotiating in real estate, you have to be ethical, but you don't have to be fair. And that's what's tough, because when you agree to work for your client, you're agreeing to do everything you can on their behalf. You are agreeing to stacking the cards in their favor. You might want to let that other person know, but you have to pause and ask yourself, am I doing right by my seller or my buyer if I do that?
Okay, so now you're in dual agency though, and that would be considered negotiating to the detriment of the other party, correct?
Right. If you want to throw the dual agency in the mix.
Well, in our market, it's a high possibility,
Absolutely.
so that would be unethical in that.
But I still think you have to be careful with that clause, because what if your buyers don't want the purchase agreement to be canceled?
What would you do?
I mean,
Right, then they just say, we remove our contingency, and they're locked in.
Or.
You can get, the buyers can get no response from the seller, and the buyers can say, okay, well, hey, we don't want this to cancel, we still want it, we just say, hey, we're accepting the home as it is. You know, we've had inspection, we're accepting the results, we're removing the contingency, they can still move forward. So they're good either way, if you add that verbiage in there. Mr. Jim?
If we add this verbiage onto the inspection addendum,
Yes, sir.
then we have to remove the lines that say that if they don't come to agreement by a certain.
In my opinion, that you're adding that to trump that, or you could say this supersedes any other language in lines or whatever.
Or strike those lines,
Absolutely, that, you could do that as well.
because this is completely different from what it says on.
Exactly.
Can you cross that off of the? Not messing.
You can make whatever changes you want to, so long as everybody signs off on it, right? But if you want to take it a step further, Jim makes a good point. You could say, you know, this language supersedes the language on lines, whatever,
Yeah.
or replaces language on lines, whatever.
Yeah.
Was there anything else? Otherwise, we've got about 5 minutes over, so. Good meeting?
Yes.
Good. Did I freak you out? No, I'm just kidding. I appreciate
A little bit.
Yeah.
Just enough to make it.
Good. I appreciate you guys coming. Thanks very much. I think some committees are maybe meeting after this meeting, so have a good committee meeting. And again, let me know if you need anything. Thank you.
Thank you.